Welcome, believers. Welcome, conspiracy theorists. Welcome to the wonderfully weird world of the Tinfoil Hat Fan Club, where we wear this hat with pride. And if you want to be a member of the Tinfoil Hat Fan Club, please like and subscribe. Now, on today's episode, I want to talk about the Allagash alien abduction case. Okay, it starts in 1976 and involves four men. Okay, Jack and Jim Weiner, they were twins. Chuck Rack, okay, and Charlie Foltz. So please stay listening and I will tell you all about it. Welcome back then, gang, welcome back. So today's alien abduction story, the Allagash River in Maine, all started in 1976 when four men were abducted by aliens while canoeing. Okay, their names were Jack and Jim Weiner, they were twins, Chuck Rack and Charlie Foltz. Now, all four men were abducted by aliens while on a night's fishing trip near their campsite. Now, this is one of the most remarkable on record, as all four witnesses went through hypnotic regression and record exactly the same event. And, as we will cover, one of the four would appear to continue to experience abductions and visitation events years after the bizarre night on the Allagash waterway in Maine. Now, this event is well known in UFO circles and one that continues to fascinate, perhaps because it would appear to be extremely credible. It would also be subject to years of detailed investigation by the UFO body MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, an organisation that started in 1969 and now has over 4,000 members. The investigation would not only look into the events of 1976, but also unlock some strange events that have been experienced by the two twins across their lifetimes, lifelong events that can be found in any other abduction account all over the world. So, this story starts when four friends pack their vehicle with their belongings and on the 20th of August head out from Boston on their way to the Allagash River in northern Maine, planning to canoe along the river and camp out for the night and do plenty of fishing. All was well for the first 6 days. In fact, it was pretty much as planned. Then on the 7th day, August the 26th, they set up camp on the bank of Eagle Lake, which resides on the Allagash waterway. This is when things got a bit batshit weird. Now, they had decided, rightly or wrongly, to spend the early hours of the night fishing. It was pitch black, so they came up with the idea to build a fire, a big fire, to use as a beacon to find their way back safely. So obviously when they're canoeing on the lake, if it's pitch black, they're not going to have a point of reference, so they built a fire. Okay, so not long after settling in a position on the lake and casting their lines out, Chuck began to get a weird vibe, like someone was watching them. And I think we've all had that sensation. Honestly, I think we have. Okay, now he would later state to the MUFON investigators that when he turned around to check out the area, he felt and then spotted a large bright sphere of coloured lights hovering motionless about 300 feet above the southern eastern rim of the cove. He then managed to grab the attention of his three friends, and they all watched as this sphere started coming up from the trees at the edge of the cove. Weird. Okay, I mean, it's pitch black, it's late at night, isn't it? That's weird. Each would later recall how the object had a gyroscopic motion to its surface. It appeared as if it had pure energy flowing over the surface. Now, that's maybe why Chuck felt it first. You know, we all have this, don't you? Know, when you get goosebumps, you feel stuff. It also seemed to have four different colours that kind of melted into each other with a heavy liquid effect. Now, while the other three just stared in disbelief, Charlie grabbed a flashlight and started signalling the bright multicoloured sphere like in the style of Morse code. As he did so, the object that was now lifting off, heading over the trees, came to a sudden stop. Oh dear. It now started heading towards the canoe, and as it did so, a tube-like beam of light emerged from the underside of the craft. It was stretching down towards the murky waters below and still heading towards the canoe. I bet they all felt like giving Charlie a bit of a kick in now, eh? Bless him, right? Now, as you can imagine, if we all put ourselves in that situation, they're panicking and they start trying to canoe back to the campsite. But before they know it, the beam of light is upon them and everything became bright and confusing. So the spaceship is now over them. The beam of light is literally covering the canoe. It's bright, and of course, obviously, they're starting to panic. Now, the next thing Charlie remembers, he's in the water and dragging himself to the campsite. So beam of light, he's in the water. Jack and Jim are already there, and each of them are staring at the craft, which is now moving away from them. Chuck was still in the canoe and was now just staring in a trance at the glowing sphere. Watching the sphere move away, he came to his senses and joined the rest of his friends. So it's a jolt of time. They see the beam, then they're on the water side. Now, from the twins' perspective, as the craft was closing in, they knew they had no chance of outrunning the object. However, as the craft moved in, their memories kind of jumped forward. Now, that's missing time. Normally, all abduction victims get it, okay? So Jack would recall that 1 minute the craft was on top of them, and the next minute he was on the shoreline, watching as the craft hovered about 30 feet from the water's surface, with its beam still hitting the water. After about 5 minutes, the craft started to rise. After a steady rise, the craft shot into the sky and was gone. Jim would add, we all seemed to be in a state of shock. We just stood there, unable to talk or move. Now, after Chuck, he was the last one to leave the canoe, join them on the shore, the group would make their way back to the campsite, or more importantly, back to the fire. When they arrived to their fire, they were in shock. When they arrived to their shock, the fire that only 20 minutes ago was blazing strong with at least 2 hours of logs and fuel was now a pile of red embers. Before they set out, the group had placed several large logs on the fire to burn for at least 2 hours so they could use it as a beacon. They could all swear that they were only in the water for 20 minutes, but in the light of the now dying fire, they had to admit they were missing for at least 2 hours. Now, this window of time would privately weigh on each of these young men for the next 12 years. The craft, the light beam, can all be stuffed at the back of your mind, dismissed and forgotten, but the missing time was hard to explain. Then, a chance encounter would bring the group back together to discover the events of that summer evening in 1976. As time ticked on and years passed, the four men, while remaining friends, forgot the incident and went about their life. Life gets in the way, doesn't it? You go to work, you have children, you worry about bills, you know. Jim, though, would suffer a head injury several years later, and one of the side effects of this injury is a form of epilepsy. Now, during his treatment, reoccurring nightmares would creep in. He and his friends from the camp trip in 1976 are all in a strange place. Furthermore, and for reasons he didn't understand, they were all nude. Even more bizarre, strange bug-eyed humanoids were all around them. So he's had this head injury and he's starting to have these dreams. Perhaps the strangest and most chilling side effect of his head injury was the time he would wake up in bed and find creatures surrounding his bed. Sometimes they would levitate him upwards, he himself unable to move. Now, maybe it wasn't the head injury causing this. Well, look, it could be rear visitations, couldn't it? Now, fascinated by Jim's story, his doctor would ask if he had ever been involved in any unusual activity. It was then that Jim would reveal the episode on Eagle Lake in Allagash and the missing time that none of the group would still recall. Now, because doctors talked amongst themselves, Jim's doctor was familiar with UFO sightings and more specifically the claim of alien abductions. Now, because of that train of thought, when he noticed that a UFO researcher and an investigator called Ray Fowler was due to hold a lecture close, he managed to get Jim and the rest of the group to attend. Luckily, really, Okay, so Jim would approach Ray Fowler and tell him of their encounters and the missing time that they would like to try and recall. Okay, so this is Doctor, as obviously saw this Ray Fowler. He's obviously saw a poster or an advert for it. He's convinced Jim and his gang to go to this UFO conference, met this bloke, and this is how MUFON get involved. Okay, this is how MUFON get involved in this case. Okay then, so MUFON consultant and hypnotist Tony Constantino would begin looking into the case in January 1989. It was one of the most detailed in recent history and would take over 2 years to complete. As is standard procedure in such regression cases, all 4 would go under alone and separate from the other. Now, amazingly, all 4 would produce the same account. Now, under hypnosis, according to the statements, when the strange beam of light hit them, they were literally enveloped within it, as if it was a hollow tube. It would transfer them to the object overhead. Now, when they came to their senses on board this otherworldly ship, strange humanoid creatures awaited them. Now, even more unnerving, these creatures immediately took control of the 4 students' minds, meaning they were physically unable to resist any order these creatures was issued. Each of them was instructed to remove their clothes. Upon doing so, they were told to sit on a cold plastic bench. The room had a diffuse white light. They would further examine the flexibility of their arms and legs before instructing each of them, in turn, to lay on a nearby table. Now, numerous strange devices and instruments scanned over their bodies during this procedure. It would appear the creatures would collect various samples, including skin, saliva, blood, and sperm. Then came the instructions to dress and enter into another room. They would line up in front of a round portal in one of the walls. One by one, they would step into this portal. Upon doing so, they would float down to the canoe on the water below. As well as the strange sensation each felt in their bodies, each would also note how the light seemed to hold the canoe steady, while each of them dropped into it. What is even stranger, whether by coincidence or not, each would find themselves in the exact same position as when the UFO arrived. Now, at this point, they came to their senses and scrambled to the water's edge, turning in time to see the craft move off in the distance. The detail about a portal is an extremely interesting one. Several other accounts of alien abduction mention stepping into such a portal and returning to the point of abduction. So it's not only this abduction story that has that portal. Of more concern to the investigators in the Allagash case, though, was the emerging evidence from the regression sessions that Jack and Jim had not only had several visitations since the incident in 1976, but both had experiences stretching back to their early childhood. Each of them would describe in detail and matching the other's account of strange creatures waking them in their bedrooms when they were young children. They would then leave with these creatures on board a craft waiting discreetly above their house. So, the Allagash alien abduction story. 4 men, all abducted, all telling the same story under hypnosis, all had time missing. Jack still experiences abduction incidents. In May 1988, Jack and his wife would experience an abduction incident in the remote and quiet area of Townshed, Vermont. Now, this particular incident, Jack and his wife in 1988, this particular incident resulted in the discovery of a strange burn mark on the bottom of Jack's feet, as well as a biopsy-like scoop mark on his ankle. Again, whether coincidental or not, this mark was directly above a mark remaining from an operation Jack had several years previous. Now, this operation was to remove a sudden lump that appeared out of nowhere. What is further interesting here is developments following the removal of the lump. They would inform Jack that they were unaware of what it was and they were investigating further. So they've removed the lump and they are finding out what it is. Now, when MUFON investigators would attempt to track down the records of this operation, they were with the military pathologists. The military gave no further information despite repeated requests for access to the files of this medical procedure. Why are the military involved? And this lump, what is so fascinating about it? Now, do you think it's an implant that these aliens gave him? The military have removed it and they're just simply not giving it back or telling them the truth. So let's just say that is an implant. So what's your thoughts? The Allagash alien abduction case. Me, for once, I am going to believe all four of them. Okay, so if you like, drop me a line in the comments and tell me what you think. Do you believe it? Do you not believe it? Well, look, this is the Tinfoil Hat Fan Club. Please wear your tin hat with pride and like and subscribe. That would be fantastic. And I'll catch you on the next one.